Napoleon said, "A good commander should not be unduly elated by success, nor should he be unduly depressed by defeat." What he meant was, after any victory, there is a great danger of the enemy counterattacking, while your troops are celebrating, looting, and getting drunk. On the other hand, after any defeat, the enemy is vulnerable to counterattack. While his guard is down and his troops are looting, celebrating, and getting drunk, you can take the initiative and counterattack when he's at his more vulnerable. We need to be positive. We need to be constructive. There is an opportunity now, while voters, leaders, and candidates might for a moment be humble, teachable, and open to learning. It's very hard to teach most people most of the time because most people are self-satisfied, arrogant, and particularly politicians, but sorry to say the voters too. Got so many people so arrogant before the elections, and you could just see they all had these great hopes, great predictions, and so on. But when they've been disappointed, then people might be, for a moment, teachable and open. And so there's not a moment to lose. You can't wait 5 years till next elections. We've got to start now. We need to educate people and enlist them and encourage them. We need to inform people, involve them, and inspire them. To motivate them, to mobilize them, empower them really, and to maintain momentum. And this has not been done. This is the time to help our people understand what happened and why it happened and what we can positively, practically do going forward. It's always far better to light a candle than just to curse the darkness. A lot of people are good at complaining. Some people have a gift of criticism, ministry of discouragement. They can tell you why things can't work. When we were talking about Cape Independence, there are people like, it can never work for this, this, and this reason. They don't ask a question. They just assume they know everything. They assume the people advocating things haven't done research, haven't considered these very issues. And it's incredible how many people just want to give you reasons as to why your solutions won't work. Not that they can suggest any better solutions, because they're not into solutions. So looking at what happened, despite all the predictions, some parties almost got wiped off the board. A lot of parties never got off the ground. Cope disappeared. Cope is now copeless. The Good Party, or as I call them, the Good for Nothing Party, the Good for Nothing Party has got shrunk down to 1 seat. And so there's a lot of, and there was Auntie Pat campaigning to be the Premier of the Western Cape, and she's got 1 seat nationally out of 400. So the big losers in the last election were the ANC and the EFF, who've been cut down to size dramatically. The big winners were the DA, who seem to have recovered the votes that they'd lost to the Freedom Front in the last election, and MK, of course. MK was a big winner, and the Patriotic Alliance came out of almost nowhere to get an astounding amount of seats. The PA's got 9 seats, and coming from almost nowhere, that's a big surprise. The sad thing for our friends is Freedom Front Plus has lost a lot of seats. They're down from, what did they have?
I don't know, but they've got 10 now.
No, they're down to 6 according to this board. According to this board, they're down to 6. I think they had 10.
They would have more.
Hopefully, say, I don't see them anywhere on the board. So that's a bit hopeless. Shame. I see that Muzimani's party end up with 2, and he thought people were voting for him when he was running the DA. So we see Rise is down to 2. The ACDP seems to be down to 3 votes, if I'm reading it right. 3 seats nationally. So pretty sad. So at the moment, the ANCs are minority governments. They're the largest party, but they are under 50%. They got down to just, was it 42%? No, I think it was 40% plus something, 40%, comma. The EFF's under 9% now, but MK is now they're now the 3rd largest party. The DA is the official opposition now. The options here going forward is the ANC has to make an alliance to stay in power. And even if the ANC did join with the EFF, together they wouldn't make 50%. So the ANC and the EFF would probably not work out for long. when there's been alliances, including the EFF, on city council, metropolitan levels, these things normally break apart within a few weeks or months because they're just that kind of radical party that they make deal breakers, and before you know it, whatever alliance they make falls apart. MK is like a wrecking ball too. They're insisting they will not be in alliance with the ANC unless the ANC first gets rid of Ramaphosa. They talk about boycotting the opening of parliament. They talk about boycotting the city councils, the provincial parliaments. So their policy is already that of boycott and insisting on, before you even have negotiations, your leader's got to leave and things like that. So it's probably not going to work with them. So the ANC's been in serious discussions with the DA for an alliance. That could work. They've got enough members between the two of them in Parliament to make an alliance that would probably work. The problem is most of the DA supporters would be aghast, horrified, and probably ditch the DA in future if they did it. And the ANC has many people horrified at an alliance with the DA. So while it would probably work on a pragmatic side, the supporters on both sides would be against it. Interestingly, this is what a lot of business people are advocating, that the DA and the ANC go in alliance because it should moderate the ANC somewhat, hold them back a bit. What they call the Armageddon alliance is the Armageddon doomsday scenarios, an EFF ANC scenario, because that would mean expropriation of property would go ahead. That could lead to a complete collapse of investor confidence, flight of capital, withdrawal of investments. It would lead to the rand plummeting, massive more unemployment, basically a Zimbabwe scenario. So that could still be on the cards, but it's unlikely because even if it happened, it wouldn't last. The ANC and the EFF never managed to stay in the same room and talk to one another. MK doesn't even want to begin to talk to the government unless they kick out Ramaphosa, which is unlikely to happen. Interestingly, at the moment we're seeing MK, the Zuma party, in serious talks with the IFP, and they talk about an alliance to run KZN, which is intriguing because IFP and MK have a lot of things they disagree on, but I think the idea of having a Zulu administration to displace the ANC administration for KZN might well happen. So you might see MK and IFP working together. Now, can all the other parties join together with the ANC to form an alliance? It's possible that the ANC will seek the Patriotic Alliance, who would definitely go into negotiations with them for a coalition, and then they'd need someone else. Maybe the IFP and PA might work together with ANC on national level, but the most likely scenario right now still is the DA and the ANC. So you could have the DANC very soon. So whatever happens, it's going to be bad. It's going to be confusing. We're going to see all kinds of bad things coming as a result of this election. The one thing is, no matter what happens, the ANC is going to continue to loot and be incompetent. We're going to see ANC representing another night with candles. Load shedding will come back for sure. Load shedding can only stop for important things like elections and World Cup soccer, but they won't be able to keep the lights on the whole time. Now, if the ANC and the DA join together, they might bring a bit of stability to the markets. It might be better economically, but it will destroy the credibility of the DA in the same way as the National Party destroyed themselves when they went into alliance with the ANC in 1999. After running on a campaign, vote National Party for a strong opposition to ANC. National Party won the Cape and immediately handed over to ANC, and then their party disappeared. So a DA-NC alliance might be a disaster for the DA, although it may help the ANC. If the ANC goes into alliance with disastrous alliances like the EFF and MK, which is not likely, it would accelerate the slip into chaos in this country, which would accelerate people's interest in secession in the Cape, for example. We could see something else happen. We could see MK and IFP work together for secession of KwaZulu-Natal. That could easily happen. That's quite a scenario. You might see the whole of KwaZulu-Natal breaking away from South Africa. In which case, other parts of the country like the Cape would probably follow suit, because there's a huge amount of support for Cape and for KwaZulu secession. If you get a doomsday scenario, whatever happens, the country is going to see a deterioration under this new alliance system. And that's going to lead people to look for solutions, including secession. So I believe that there will be a greater interest in Cape secession coming forward. Interesting point this, the forest was shrinking, but the trees kept voting for the axe, because the axe was clever and convinced the trees, because this handle was made of wood, he was one of them. And so you do get this kind of attitude. You know, some people think, well, we've got to vote for these people because, and they've got something that sort of resonates with you, but the result is the forest keeps decreasing. Here's the election results. Basically, you can see the way it's set here. The purple shows where the MK party is very strong, and the green shows where the ANC is very strong, and the yellow shows where the DA is stronger, and so on. So you can see from this one how the Western Cape is very much on its own separately. KwaZulu-Natal's got its own identity, and the ANC is super strong, of course, in the Transkei, Eastern Cape section, and Limpopo area. But the EFF has diminished dramatically. They're not a major majority anywhere right now. The Mpumalanga has also pretty much been regained by the ANC somewhat, and the EFF is lost in this particular map. They're not a majority factor. They're not even the official opposition. They're not even the third largest party. They're now the fourth largest. So the ANC has degenerated quite a lot. So what can we learn from all of this? Well, what went wrong in recent elections? Overconfidence on many sides. Underestimating one's enemies. The ANC certainly underestimated their enemies, and sorry to say, so did the Cape Independence parties and those affiliated with it. There was a lot of overconfidence, and I'm sorry, from the voter side, there's a lot of apathy. Huge amounts of apathy and inertia and distraction. Many people voted their fears, not their values. The vast majority of Christians in this country voted for the DA, which does not represent Christian values. The Democratic Alliance is for abortion, they're for LGBTQ perversion, and the bulk of people who vote for them do not support that, but they obviously held their noses and just voted DA because they thought that was the best to stand against their enemy of the ANC. But also fake history, disinformation campaigns, fake news. So how do we counter this? It said 5% of people make things happen. 15% of people watch things happen. But even then, most people don't seem to know what's happening. I can see this tour guide explaining, if you look over there, under bushes, that distance you can see a line, and they're missing the one right next to them. 80% of people have no clue what happened. It's also observed, when I was in the military, they said in military intelligence, 5% of people think. 15% of people think they think. 80% of people never think. That's very insulting, but for those who think, for the 5%, you need books, seminars, conferences, documentation, which is what we try to provide in our Case for Secession book, for example. For those who think they think, leaflets and video documentaries are sufficient. For the 80%, you reduce to sound bites, slogans, t-shirts, bumper stickers. But every movement needs to mobilize every section of society, starting with leadership training, books and seminars for the thinkers, for those who make things happen, and going through leaflets and documentaries for the 15%, but not neglecting slogans, sound bites and social media, t-shirts and bumper stickers for the 80%. So we, for example, have used billboards for our pro-life movement. We've used radio, we used magazines and leaflets and websites, social media. The goal is to inform, to inspire, and to involve, to educate and enlist, to motivate and to mobilize. We don't just want to tickle people's thinking and their mind, we want to reach their heart and we want to reach their hands and their feet. Raw information, such as makes up the majority of the newspapers, is cheap. Information is cheap. But understanding is valuable. But participation is most precious. We've mobilized tens of thousands of people on the streets of Cape Town in the past to protest against the paganization of the country, the legalization of abortion, pornography, prostitution, gambling, and all the other evils that the ANC and, sadly, the DA stand for. Now, in the Cape, we have a vision of a free and independent Cape of Good Hope. For that, we need to understand our history. Free the Cape, Cape exit. We've mobilized marches. For example, 2 years ago, we had a March for Freedom on Freedom Day. Good day, good opportunity. Thousands of people gathered and marched under a wide variety of groups. You could see the Freedom Front Plus, the Cape Independence Party, the Cape Independence Action Group, and others marched to the City Council, Provincial Parliament in Duval Avenue, and we made a stand and delivered manifesto, the Cape Freedom March. Question, why didn't they have a march this year on Freedom Day? We needed a momentum. It should have been maintained. Doing this 2 years ago was good, but doing it several times since would have been even better. We shouldn't just hope for a better life, we should vote for one. And most people did not vote for Cape Independence in the Western Cape. Most voted for DA, who've said they despise Cape Independence and have dismissed it, and that they'll never call for it. So what are people doing with their votes? The Cape has its own history, its own heritage. We are the mother city. We go back over 350 years. Now, a couple of years ago, KwaZulu celebrated 200 years of the Kingdom of the Zulu. And that's a wonderful achievement. But the Cape goes back double that amount of time. The Cape's been an entity for 500 years as its own identity. We've got a lot of history in the Cape. And now the Cape's future is going to be much more turbulent in the next months and years to come. We could have chosen a quick way to Cape Independence if a majority of people had voted for Cape Independence parties, or at least sufficient to bring the DA under 50% so that they would need an alliance with a Cape Independence orientated party in order to rule in the Western Cape. And then they could have been forced to have a referendum. So we could have gone the easy route in this last election, but most people chose to vote their fears and display their ignorance rather than vote their values, and that's sad. So what's coming up in the future is things are going to get worse in the country. The economy is going to deteriorate, crime will increase. A lot of things will happen as a result of the bad choices people made in the last elections. But that will fuel more demands for Cape Independence. You might recall that before the COVID cult, lockdown lunacy, masquerade madness, salvation by vaccination cult, there were 7,000 people signed up for Cape Exit. But along with the COVID cult and all the lockdown lunacy, you saw a massive growth in the Cape Independence movement, and Cape Exit grew to about 800,000 in support. After the Aluta Continua riots in KwaZulu-Natal, July 2022, you suddenly saw a massive increase in support for Cape Independence, and it's now up to 840,000. But what happened to those 840,000 Cape Exit supporters when it came to the elections just last week? So we've got serious reason to question people's sincerity and intelligence and focus. Talk about distraction. We've had a lot of distraction. But now, there's two extremes when you reach this kind of situation. When most people face the threats of secular humanism and the New World Order and attempts to rebuild Babylon and privileges for perverts, campaign LGBTQ and all that, many respond in one of two extremes. There are those who want to deny that there's any problem. There's no problem. And then there's the other extreme where people say there's no hope. Now, to try and deny reality and to claim there's no problem is to fail to recognize the depravity of man. Man is depraved, man is in rebellion to Almighty God, and it's impossible to violate God's laws without serious, disastrous consequences. What we sow is what we reap. So you can't deny the problem. But on the other hand, those who claim there's no hope are failing to take into account the sovereignty of God, the power of God's word, and the power of prayer. So you've got all these people out there who say, there is no hope. Well, if they say that, they're not acting like Christian at all, because of course there's hope. And I've got so many people, South Africa's finished, the Cape's finished, there's no hope, and there's people talking about fleeing the country, leaving, migrating and so on. I've heard people say, even now this weekend that I was up in Transvaal, I'm telling all my children to leave the country. I mean, this is what somebody said. I would never say that. I don't believe that true. I've got all 4 of my children, all 3 of my grandchildren living in Cape Town. I have a hope for the future. I've got a belief in the future. And we're staying and we're building for the future. But there's many people who say there's no hope. Well, don't they believe in the power of God? Don't they believe in the power of the Word of God? Don't they believe in the power of prayer? For God has not given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. Submit to God, resist the devil, and he will flee from you. But if we're not submitting to God and we're not resisting the devil, we can't expect victory. But thanks be to God, he gives us the victory through our Lord Jesus Christ. Therefore, my dear brothers, stand firm. Let nothing move you. Always give yourselves fully to the work of the Lord, because you know your labor in the Lord is not in vain. So our goal is, going forward, to inform, to inspire, to involve, the 3 I's. In fact, I get some of that from Operation Nehemiah. If you turn to the book of Nehemiah, what did Nehemiah do? He's facing a disastrous situation. Jerusalem is in ruins. The walls have been broken down. The gates have been burned with fire. What does he do? His first step is to gather information, then to mobilize intercession, and then to involve people and implement a plan, and getting everyone to build with a tool in one hand and a weapon in the other. And he rebuilds the wall using the trumpet to rally people to that part of the wall that's under attack. So using Operation Mobilization, Operation Nehemiah, we've been able to mobilize people to protest against pornography in the shops till we got it out, to mobilize against abortion, to make such a stand that the abortionists are complaining that while abortion is legal in South Africa, there's very few medical people willing to get the training for abortion. And there's very few people willing to do abortions. And there are whole provinces and sections in South Africa where you can't find a single medical facility willing to do an abortion. Not a single medical person willing to in whole provinces. And in fact, they've got that problem in America too, where they're complaining the abortionists are dying out. The younger doctors are not interested in getting the training, not interested in participating in abortions. So we've seen real progress where the abortionists are complaining we don't have enough medical people willing to do the procedure, even though it's legal. We've had other victories too. Berlin Wall came down, Iron Curtain collapsed, Eastern Europe opened up to the gospel. That was a result of the 7-year Jericho prayer march, where churches focused for 7 years on bringing down the Iron Curtain, collapsing communism, opening up Eastern Europe for the gospel. And it happened in 7 years. So we've got to mobilize people by inspiring them with examples of excellence to fight, to innovate, to persevere to victory. Professor Martin Luther declared, if I profess with the loudest voice and the clearest exposition every portion of the truth of God, except precisely that point which the world and the devil are at that moment attacking, then I'm not confessing Christ, however boldly I may be professing him. Where the battle rages, there the loyalty of the soldier is proved. And to be steady on all the battlefront besides is mere flight and disgrace if he flinches at that point. The word of God comes to us, who will rise up for me against the evildoers? Who will make a stand for me against the workers of iniquity? Psalm 94, verse 16. We are more than conquerors through Christ Jesus who loved us. Submit to God, resist the devil. He will flee from us if we are submitting to God and resisting the devil. We've got to stand up, step out, and fight the good fight of faith. Greater is he who is in us than him who is in the world. We should smash cultural Marxism, the Marxism that is permeating the media, the fake news, the fake history, the fake education, the indoctrination that's in so many universities and schools. We need to fight against it. Smash the cultural worldview that undercuts and underlies all of the chaos that's going on, the corruption in our society and so on. So we've been building up tools to use in this fight, or weapons, should we say. The case for Cape Independence, we've got whole audio box sets, we've got videos, we've got the book, case for session. These can be used, these can help in mobilizing. Now, we even made this super easy. Just the cover and the inside cover proves the point. We had the Premier of the Western Cape, Alan Windey, saying that he would never call for secession, and we had John Steenhuisen of the DA state publicly in front of union buildings, secession is stupid and unworkable. Well, here's 23 examples of successful secessions in history, some in recent history. Is Switzerland stupid and unworkable? Is the Netherlands, the United States? All grew out of secession, as did Finland and Norway, Ireland, Pakistan, Taiwan. Taiwan's a good example. Singapore is an even better example. A country that seceded in 1965 from Malaysia, no natural resources, basically swamp and island, and very unpromising little bit of territory. But Singapore is an economic powerhouse because of secession and a free market. It's a tax haven. And Namibia, that's not that far from us. Namibia used to be the 5th province of South Africa. Namibia seceded in 1990. They're doing better than South Africa right now. Economically, crime, many different levels. And we've got a bigger economy in the Western Cape than Namibia has. Why would a Western Cape be unworkable? Latvia, Lithuania, and Estonia are much smaller than the Western Cape, but they've made a going concern, as have Croatia and Slovenia, Eritrea, Slovakia. I've been in all those countries. East Timor seceded. South Sudan, I had a lot to do with the independence campaign for South Sudan. Everyone told me all along it wouldn't happen, it wouldn't work. Even the founder of the SPLA, Colonel John Garang, and the second commander of the SPLA, Commander Salva Kiir, who today is president of South Sudan, argued with me as recently as 2002. It's a good idea, Peter, but it can never work. It'll never happen. Not possible. The government of Sudan would never allow it. We can fight for autonomy, but we'll never get independence. And I said to Salva Kiir, unless you redraw the map where Christian black people are the majority in South Sudan, you'll always be a persecuted, discriminated against black minority in an Arabic majority country. You've got to redraw the map. You have to be a majority in your own country, or you will never be free. And today he is the president of an independent South Sudan, youngest country in the world, dating back to 9th of July 2011. So this book, we've got in the back cover the same slogan that we used for South Sudan's independence campaign, let my people go. Many people forget Israel grew out of an exodus from Egypt. The Hebrews seceded from Egypt. And that should be a theme for us as well. And we've got the back cover designed, reminding us of the Swiss flag. When you've got a plus in your flag, that's very positive. Switzerland is one of the first examples of secession dating back to 1291. Switzerland seceded from Austria. And I'm sure there are many people who said at the time, it is unworkable, it's stupid, it can never happen. Austria will never allow it, and so on. And I'm sure many people said to the Latvian, Lithuanians, and Estonians, and the Finns, you can't secede from the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union will never allow it. But it happened anyway. And we've now got this case secession book available as an e-book, as print on demand, and we were offering the people in the Cape Independence movement that they could buy these books at a 60% discount. So we got it at such a subsidized rate. The printer really believed in what we were doing. He only charged us for paper and ink. So we could offer this book for just 50 Rand, but for the independence groups, they could buy it for effectively 20 Rand each and sell them at 50. They're getting a massive profit. They can use this for educating the people. They could use it for mobilizing the people, use book launches as an opportunity to educate the people, and then they could make money for their movements. So how many books do you think the Referendum Party or the Cape Independence Party or the Freedom Front purchased and used? Very, very little. We gave them gifts of a pack of 10 each, and most of them thought that was enough. And extraordinary. Here's an opportunity for informing the public. It's a tool that we knew would be important. Like I used the Faith Undefined Sudan books to help mobilize the independence movement for Sudan, because books are important. Just like if you think the American War of Independence, yes, there was speeches like give me liberty or give me death. But there were books as well, like In Defense of Liberty Against Tyrants and Lex Rex, that laid the foundation for the American independence movement. You've got to have slogans, you've got to have leaflets, you must have public meetings and speeches, but you need books too. The Reformation might have had the slogans like we have at the Luther Rose window as you come up the stairs, the battles, cries of the Reformation. Sola Scriptura, Scripture alone is the ultimate authority. Sola Gratia, salvation is by the grace of God alone. Sola Fide, salvation is received by faith alone. Soli Deo Gloria, everything must be done to the glory of God alone. Solus Christus, Christ alone is the head of the church. Those are some of the slogans. Grace is before sacraments, and Scripture is our ultimate authority. I mean, these were slogans, and they were important, but Martin Luther's books were super important as foundations, as was John Calvin. So you need books to lead any movement. People need to be convinced, and some people need the documentation, the answers to the different questions, and the questions are often very, very predictable, and we know about it, and that's why we had a well-illustrated book that can prove the point, that can mobilize the people, inform people. And yet the independence movements didn't see the need. They thought, let's just do sound bites, posters, and social media posts. Well, memes are not an alternative to books. There's many people who need the books. Obviously, not enough people believed in Cape Independence to vote for it. They might have signed up with Cape Exit. They might have liked some of what Cape Independence Party and the Referendum Party said. But when it came to voting in the last elections, last week, most people voted DA in the Western Cape. And the DA had already said they don't plan to support independence. So unless we could put our votes in, we're not going to change their minds. We've got the website, capeofgoodhope.africa, which has got a lot of resources available, a lot of articles, presentations, audios, and videos. We've got the flags, as you would see on our flagpole. We stand for Cape Independence. There's great videos out that help us understand the agenda of the New World Order, like Masters of Deceit, Agenda 2. Outstanding resources. We've got history books that help people to understand what's happened. The better you know your history, the better you can make the future. So if you go on our frontlinemissionsa.org website, you'll see a lot of good resources. The story of how South Sudan won its independence is also in our Frontline Behind Enemy Lines for Christ book, and some of the Eastern Europe countries' independence campaigns too. So if you go onto frontlinemissionsa.org website, you'll find audios and videos of different Reformation Society meetings, seminars, workshops, some free PDFs, and books that you might want to order. History is a battlefield. Karl Marx said the first battlefield is a rewriting of history. So if people think they can mobilize a movement to bring about a free, independent country like the Cape of Good Hope without teaching the people history, without history books, they're deluded. It's not possible. The Marxists put a lot of energy into history, rewriting history books, indoctrinating people before they try to launch their revolutions. They call it conscientizing and organizing. Before they get to revolution phase, they need to first conscientize the people, they need to educate them before they can think of starting a revolution. The Marxists don't just start by laying landmines and throwing petrol bombs. They start by infiltrating universities, changing the books, organizing films from Hollywood, things that will help get people emotionally and intellectually committed to their cause. And so we've seen need to have books produced in English and Afrikaans on our South African history, audio and video sets. We've invested in home education for over 30 years, building up Christian Liberty Books to provide home education resources, importing books from around the world. We've produced quite a few of our own books as well, many of which are now available as ebooks and as prints on demand. The vision is Africa for Christ, and I believe an independent, free Cape is an essential part of that, because the Cape has been dedicated to Christ from the very beginning. The first act of Jan van Riebeeck, the first governor and administrator of the Cape, was to kneel in Table Bay Harbour and pray that this outpost, Cape Town, would be for the spreading of the light of the Reformed faith throughout the continent of Africa. And he had a vision of Cape Town being a base for missions for the continent. And others like Andrew Murray have deepened that commitment since, like the Africa Institute at Wellington, which was set up to send missionaries out throughout the continent of Africa. And I've come across missionaries in Nigeria, churches celebrating 100 years of Christianity in Nigeria, from missionaries who came from the Africa Institute, from the Cape of Good Hope, sent out by Andrew Murray. And his vision was Africa for Christus. And that's a slogan we've adopted in our mission too. So I don't know if anyone's got other things they would like to add as we look at what went wrong in the elections. And I've asked Anthony if he could perhaps start the ball rolling with some observations he's had, because he's been involved on the grassroots levels as well.
I think it's with a lot of shock that a lot of us watched Christian parties do so badly again. The one I voted for lost 200,000 votes, and I don't even know how that's even humanly possible. That you don't know that you're going to lose those votes, that you've got no intelligence on the ground. I think that there's an absolute slackness about these small parties that's actually quite shocking. They're not prepared to do the groundwork. The ANC originally built its party by branches, by absolutely ruthlessly building branches throughout the country and then educating those branches and then using them like a weapon. Whereas the modern day parties, like the 2 or 3 Christian parties that one of which I used to be part of, and the other one I've also been part of, is absolutely shocking. There is no groundwork. Their branches are weak. They don't want to do the hard work of going from cell group to cell group, church to church. They don't want to do that hard work. It's jobs for pals at the top branch levels. They put all their friends and not people that are competent and able to actually do the job in charge of different aspects of their party. I mean, the one that I was involved in, I haven't heard from them for 4 years. They're supposed to sign up every year. I thought I was a member, but I don't think I am because I haven't heard from them for 4 years. And then, and then there's no follow-ups. We'd have nothing. If you asked me about the party that I've hosted, what have they done in the last 4 years? I don't know. My wife actually said to me, is there no rallies this time? Can we not go? Yes, it's nothing at all. So the laziness of it, and the arrogance that these guys think that people are going to vote for them without doing the absolute groundwork is quite shocking, And I think that a lot of these parties have learned that, I don't think they've learned it, to be honest. I think that they're quite content to rest, that a couple of them have still got jobs and they're not worried about the terrible losses. The second thing is the incompetent leaders that we have. In these small parties, we constantly put the same leader back again. Even though the same leader lost in the last election, maybe a couple of 100,000 votes or 10, 20, 50,000 votes or whatever, they put him again as the leader of the party. Now, in a worldly sense, a CEO of a company, if he fails, you chuck him out, you get a new one. He's ruthlessly kicked out. But not us. We continue flogging the same horse. We put these old guys in our as the head of our parties, and we think that that's going to work for the youth. It doesn't. Trump learned a terrible lesson. He ignored the youth. And people say, that the election was cheated. It wasn't. It was won by the youth of America. And how his intelligence officer, I saw he fired him soon afterwards, did not know that the Democratic Party had an ace up their sleeve, the youth of America. That youth won the election. They went to all those people, house to house, knocking on doors, getting all the votes of people that were not coming. Every single youth person took their thousands and thousands, hit the streets. And they went to the houses of people that weren't voting and said, please sign these votes. And they absolutely trumped the election like that because they ignored the youth. The same thing with these parties today. Our leaders are like old. They come from my era. The youth don't want to know us old choppies. You know what I mean? They want to see new faces, and we can't change. And I was so angry at seeing those election results. Whereas the party I was joining had 400,000 votes 4 years ago, and now they've got 200. How do you lose 200,000 votes? How is it even humanly possible? Why do you not know it? Why doesn't your intelligence on the ground know it? Because nobody's working the ground. They use social media. They live in these high above all the rest of us. They don't hear what's happening on the ground. So I was terribly disillusioned, when I saw what had happened again, And and I tell you, before God, it's an insult to do so badly as Christian parties. It's an insult. You know what I mean? That we cannot rally people, they cannot rally people to their banners. But it's a work ethic thing. That's number one. They're not prepared to build ground branches that are very strong, that are infiltrating the police forums, the neighborhood watchers, ratepayers organizations. They've got no representation on the ground. Yet they want to do well in the elections. And I don't know if this is going to be a wake-up call. There's something wrong with this, what we're seeing today that's happening in our country, especially with these smaller parties, that they think they can because they can't. And I think they've got a devastating blow. And I don't know whether that's going to make any difference, honestly, because it's the same leaders who are going to be carrying on now in the same way. And it's been very shocking for me to watch the absolute defeat of these small parties. And I don't think any of them are going to easily recover from it. I know Dr. Hammond has hope, but I don't know if they'll be able to recover from that. People have had it now. You want to know that people are actually doing something. Years back, I worked for ACDP, I think it was 94 or something. We built branches from the ground. We built cell groups. We went to pastors. We had breakfast for pastors on Saturdays with speakers. We won them. We won their cell groups, cell group by cell group. We worked so hard. And we pushed that ACDP up into the kingmakers in the Western Cape. We were the kingmaker party. We did so well, but it was done by sheer blood and guts on the ground. These guys are not prepared to do that anymore. And they're sort of fading away now into extinction. You'll find some of these parties, they've just filled with fanatics still, just crazy looking people standing there trying to support something that nobody wants to support anymore. So it's been very disappointing for me to have watched this. I didn't think that the party I was supporting would be so go this route, and it's going to be very difficult for them to recover out of this or to win people's confidence back again. And I think that's most of the Christian parties. I remember years ago when I was involved in politics and that I went to a SIMSA conference. International speakers from all over the world spoke. His people hosted it at the Baxter Theatre or something like that. I can't remember where it was.
University.
Okay, yeah. And I went to go listen to these guys, and I want to tell you, they blew me away. They were top lawyers, Christian lawyers in the world. They were top advisors to presidents. It was actually mind-blowing to listen to these guys, And anyway, but the one guy, he presented from South America, why Christian parties fail in the world. And we, the ACDP, hated what he had to say. But all of that's come true. You know what I mean? Because he said your Christian party will either only draw reformers, and if you get the reformers, then the Pentecostals won't come. Or you'll draw the Pentecostals and the reformers won't come. And when the evangelicals don't like any of you, so they won't come either. It is absolute madness. It's absolute truth. And that's what we've got. We've got these parties that have taken either an ultra-charismatic view, you know what I mean, and run their party like that, and no other church groups will touch them. And it's just crazy how true that guy, how prophetic that has been for us over the years, that we cannot seem to unite. And it's been shocking for me. I'm telling you, to have watched this go down, this election. I'm just wondering how, I saw one of the leaders say after this, he said, we still got some representation in Parliament. I thought, you're just protecting your own seat. You're just happy you going back. But all our votes, you wasted. I was angry about it. He's just happy that they've gone down from, say, I think it's 10 seats to 4 now. It's shocking. You should be repenting of that. We're Christians. We do things with excellence. We win. We don't lose. We build things for God. We build structure. We work hard. And there just seems to be an utter lack of that through this country. And I think personally, and I know Dr. Hammond would like to see them recover from this, that it's the death knell for the small parties, and I don't know how you're ever going to get people to come back again. I saw how angry friends of mine were on social media against the same party that I was part of, angry, deeply angry, and saying, what are you folks doing? How can you be so useless? So, I just, trying times ahead, and maybe Dr. Hammond is right that if the ANC and DA join, that it'll make a return to these smaller parties. But I don't know what they're going back to unless there's transformation in those small parties, because without it, they've had their last trumpet call. Unless they reform and behave like Christians, work like Christians, be dedicated, utterly ruthless in achieving God's purposes here on this earth by spiritual war and by actually doing something, they haven't got a chance. So that's just my 2 cents out of this election.
We certainly hope and pray people are going to be teachable, humble, and wanting to learn. Any other comments or questions, either for Anthony or me? By the way, we did invite the leaders of all the different Cape Independence parties and so on to come and join us tonight, but none of them were available on this occasion. But they're talking about maybe another opportunity next week. We'll also invite you, even if it is an unusual time. So we will, if you're on the Reformation Society events email list, we will let you know what's going on. We'll put on the web, we'll put on social media. If you ever look on social media, Reformation 500 page has whatever is coming up in the next event. But anyway, so we did invite others, and the fact that it's just myself and Anthony tonight is not for lack of trying. We really did try to get the others here. Any questions, comments, complaints? Yes.
I think it's a comment. You see, as Christians, I believe that we should have hope, as you said, but also we should examine the hope that we have, if it's working or not. Because this Christian parties has been there a long time ago, and I don't believe that you need majority in order for you to change something that you believe in.
Yes.
I think you have to use the power that you have to just change what you can at that particular moment. And these people who are ruling these parties, they only think about the next election or how to keep the power in, and they never think about the next generation. So they use the thing that they believe people also want so that they can get people. But when they get voted, there's nothing absolutely that they do as Christians. Because we've never seen this Christian party stand for anything that is ungodly, so that we can say that they are doing something that we can vote them for. Yeah.
Yes, I can add a few things to that. I remember when the ACDP first got into Parliament, they got 2 seats in 1994 elections. In fact, they had 84,000 votes in 1994 election, which got them 2 seats in Parliament. If I remember right, they got something like 350,000 votes in 1999. And they got 7 seats in Parliament, plus a senator, or I'm calling senator, but National Council of Provinces, and quite a few city councillors. So that was 1999. And at that point, they became the kingmakers, as Anthony said. And the ACDP actually was part of a troika with the National Party, the Democratic Party, as before the Democratic Alliance, and the ACDP were in an alliance working together. And it was working so well in 1999. I think the ACDP had the deputy mayor, and the National Party had the mayor. But then the ACDP sabotaged the whole troika. National came along with a prophet in his 3-piece white suit and said, he had a word from the Lord, no alliances. Now, ACDP is in all kinds of alliances now, including with the multi-party Congress and with DA and others. But at that point, National came to the Cape and said, no alliances. Now, the Cape had negotiated an excellent alliance where basically they had 1 of 3 votes. So there was 3 votes. And, you know, the DP had 1 vote, National Party had 1 vote, and the ACDP had 1 vote, literally in running the Cape. So this was a good system, and the ACDP had a lot of respect. But at that point, National forbade them to be in alliances. They broke up the whole thing and ended with the National Party walking over to the ANC, and the whole thing fell apart, and the Cape was betrayed for the next 5 years into the hands of the ANC. And they looted a lot, and the Cape went down dramatically. And the ACDP is the one who sabotaged it on the word of a prophet that nobody had seen before, didn't see afterwards either. A word from the Lord, no alliances. Even though William Wilberforce, the ultimate Christian politician, was regularly in different alliances to bring about the end of the slave trade. And God used William Wilberforce in a magnificent way to change history back in the 1700s. And yet the ACDP came out with this bizarre national interference in the federal system that the Cape executive, which had decided on this alliance, had to withdraw from it, and they sabotaged the whole thing, and the disaster for the Cape was huge. But it's a bit worse than that too. I was asked to do a biblical worldview seminar for the ACDP members of Parliament who had just been elected, town councillors and so on, and the senator. So we were in Parliament, and we had the ACDP people coming morning and afternoon for several days as I taught basic biblical principles: economics, crime and punishment, entertainment, education, a whole lot. And it became clear in the question and answers that two of the people there were actually fairly communist in their mindset. It turned out they were Southern Communist Party plants, and another person was obviously also very socialist, humanist, and so I warned the ACDP leadership, these three people here are not thinking in a biblical worldview, and they shouldn't be your candidates at all. And the ACDP had this principle at that stage of what they called recall, that they could recall any member of Parliament or any candidate if he failed to adhere to the code of conduct, doctrines and so on of the ACDP. Well, I was meant to be part of the Guardian Committee, and that's one of the last things I did was warn about this. They never called on me afterwards. And they kept these people in, and within a few weeks, these three had crossed the floor over to the ANC in one case and the DA in two other cases. And two of the town councillors that I'd warned them about too, from a separate meeting, that was held in the Cape Flats, they voted, they had a swing vote in the Boerland, and they voted for an ANC candidate against a Democratic Party candidate. And this also caused massive ruptures to the extent that Michael Louis, who had been doing a good job as a councillor, was he a councillor or was he provincial representative? Yeah, he's a provincial chap, but provincial parliament. Michael Louis, who's bringing 2/3 of the financial support for the ACDP at that time through his whole family and his business network, doing a very good job. And he was so humiliated by it that he resigned. And he left that politics, and it was a big loss. So the chaos caused by them having people whose only claim to fame was not that they'd put time and effort into ACDP, but just because of the colour of their skin. And literally these affirmative action candidates crossed the floor, and we worked so hard to get those 7 members of Parliament, and 3 of them just walked across to the enemy. And that was the death knell of the ACDP. So the ACDP got 84,000 votes in 1994. They got 350,000 votes in 1999. They were able to boast we're the fastest growing party in Parliament, which they were at that moment. The next election, if I'm not mistaken, it was something like 200,000 votes. And then the following one, it was something like 50,000 votes, 54,000. And absolutely catastrophic decline. In fact, the ACDP in the last elections, not this last one now, but the one back in 2019, is it? 2019, they had less votes than in 94, when the population was half what it is now. So the situation has been catastrophic. And just following the trajectory, and I warned them on a number of occasions about what they were doing and where they were going, and that they had basically ostracized their own support base. They closed down parties. Am I correct in saying you were basically forced to close down your operational, the biggest ACDP branch in the country, in Tableview? And why did they close it down?
Because I had a criminal record.
Oh,
That was the excuse.
well, that's not a very good excuse, considering you did get converted in prison.
Yeah, that's right.
You could say the same about the Apostle Paul.
They didn't close just that. I had 5 other branches too. Closed.
But couldn't they just have another leader take
They
over?
didn't send anybody. They just died. They lost all the hundreds of people.
Sad. So you can't have a successful political party without branches. You need grassroots. But again, you need leadership training. But if they won't trust the leader that they're getting to train their people, when he discerns, in Q&A you get to understand where people stand. And I mean, I called it out. All the people I warned them about crossed the floor, like Mighty Madasa, who he just walked over to the ANC, took the ACDP seat and took it to them. The work we had to do to get those seats and to have those seats just stolen for lack of disciplined. The leadership were warned and the leadership did not listen, did not act. And who wants to vote for a party who's so undiscerning in their choice of leaders that you could actually be, the vote that you thought was anti-ANC is going to end up voting for the ANC. So this is some of the problems. That's just a bit of history behind it, but it's catastrophic. And the ACDP has never recovered from the betrayal of 1999. That was the high water mark.
They've still got the same leaders from those times, and nothing's changed.
Yes. Other questions, comments? Yes, Frank.
So, do we choose another Christian party?
I would-
Should we go down that road again, or not really?
Well, I've come to the conclusion that the best thing is decentralization dramatically. We don't trust leaders at the higher levels. The corruption is too high. The amount of freebies and benefits and get-rich-quick schemes involved in politics is so intense. I'd like to see things go way down to decentralization, which is why I support Cape Independence. The idea of going to more of a libertarian view of where you've got very little being decided by government. Most of the power going down to the canton, or in our case, the municipality, sort of using the Swiss and the Singapore models. I'd like to see that politicians don't have that sort of power. For example, when I was growing up, my high school teacher was a member of parliament. Mr. Rhys Davies, how can you be a member of parliament and a teacher? We don't get paid for being members of parliament, he said. It's an honorary position. We need a real job too. Now, I was only 12 years old when I heard that in high school. And why should members of parliament be being paid more than normal civil servants? If they've got to be paid at all, why is their payment not the same as that for teachers, firemen, policemen, nurses, other civil servants? It used to be that town councillors didn't get paid. Many smaller towns, the mayor didn't even get paid. They donated their time. They were successful in life, and now they were donating their time to the community. If we went back to that, you wouldn't get these greedy, corrupt predators wanting to be in high government if there was no real financial reward. They shouldn't have the power to vote themselves such huge salaries and fringe benefits. And it's not just the money that they get. A town councillor might get R1 million a year, but that's not all he gets. He gets cell phone allowance, petrol allowance, travel allowance, housing allowance, entertainment allowance, who knows what other allowance, brothel allowance, cocaine allowance, I mean, who knows? I mean, these people are as corrupt as hell. We had a cabinet minister who did renovations in his house, doubtless with government money, and he hired out suites in the Table Bay Hotel for his entire family for months while his house was being renovated. And who paid for it? The taxpayer. I mean, that kind of corruption. And did any of these guys get charged and go to jail? Did any of them have to pay back? Recently, we had Rumpo saying people are concerned that national health will be the same as the COVID relief fund, the 500 billion that disappeared. But he said, no, but we've learned about that. We'll make sure this is not stolen. Well, he recognized the 500 billion he promised for the businesses that was closed down and the lives that were destroyed was stolen. Who went to jail for that? How much money did they recover? I think that's the answer, none. So how can you trust somebody who's broken every cookie jar that they've got, and now he wants you to believe that this new National Health Insurance cookie jar, we won't smash that one, we won't loot that cookie jar. No. It's seriously bad. So I think the solution is not more politicians, but less. And those politicians must have much less power. That's why if you follow the Swiss canton system where referendums decide things on the local ground level, these Landsgemeinde, where you get the community comes together and makes the decisions, that's a lot safer. And I don't like the idea of paid politicians. Politicians should be civil servants. They should be civil and they should be servants. That would be a nice change from what we've got right now. Now they act like the big chief who, go away, you're wasting my time, you're interfering with my tea time or whatever, and the idea that you only exist to enrich me. No, we've got to get to an end of that. So any other comments?
What you just described, it can never happen. It's too far gone. I mean, how would that change?
how would it change? Well, this is why we talk about an independent Cape. Now, there's no way that you're going to get the bulk of people in the Cape to suddenly vote for that kind of future unless they are educated. And that's why it's so important that we get people understanding the history of secessions, the history of decentralization. If they can't get even their leaders, campaigners, candidates to read these books and to share them with their community, how do you expect people to vote in such a totally different mentality? Right now, the average person thinks we need more government, we need more policies, we need more laws. There should be a law for this, that, and the other. The government must. And so most people's mindset is we need more government to solve our problems. But as was pointed out so well by Ben Carson, politicians made the problems. What makes us think they can solve them? You can't get politicians to solve the problems they cause themselves. And that's why getting a businessman or medical doctor might be better in many cases to solve the problems than these professional parasites. Polyticks, many ticks, blood-sucking parasites. Polyticks, many blood-sucking parasites. So we've got to go away from this whole mentality of if this salvation by politics, if you can just elect this party, if you can just get this candidate, that's going to change everything. Not so. We must change the whole system. And that's why one system I like is the idea of a confederation of microstates of the Cape of Good Hope, where every municipality or canton is independent and the local community controls the police. The local community controls and pays for the police and the nurses and so on in their community. They determine their policies. Yes, we'll make a confederation for defense and national, international relations and so on, but we are not going to subject ourselves to dictators in another part of the country who can determine whether you can breathe fresh air or not and say you've got to get this untested substance injected into your bloodstream before you can work or travel. No, no politician should have that power. Or that your children have to do this, that, and the other. And they've got to come to this indoctrination gulag set up by the government, and they've got to wear masks and sit separated from one another. Did you notice Fauci's admitted now before Congress there was no science behind the 6-foot distancing thing? There's no science behind the masks. In fact, there was a lot of science indicating that the mask wouldn't help at all. And he knew this even when they made it policy, which the whole world followed. So how can you trust these people? I must say, right now, doctors used to be respected. Since the COVID cult, salvation by vaccination, insanity, doctors now around the world, medical doctors, are on par with used car salesmen and congressmen in terms of credibility. And I'm not surprised. Unless that medical doctor opposed the COVID cult, salvation by vaccination, insanity, how would you ever trust them again on anything? My trust in medical doctors has plummeted. I don't trust them at all. If they didn't stand up against the COVID cult, why should I trust them on anything else? Not to mention the corruption of the chemotherapy scam, which destroys people's health. The medical community does not deserve respect if they didn't make a stand. Those courageous individuals who made a stand against it at the time, good for them. But those spineless cowards and traitors who allowed their patients to be poisoned and people's minds to be destroyed through this whole lockdown lunacy, they should be treated with the same contempt we have for the politicians. Not to mention the journalists who lied, these prostitutes who promoted this whole insanity. And they are prostitutes.
I think one of the most disappointing things, if you look at the elections, was the numbers of Christians in a country where the majority profess to be Christian, but that's not showing in the numbers of the vote.
It's not.
Whether the Christian parties were, at the time of the elections, being effective or not, their core beliefs are in alignment with the will of God. So God is greater. He could use that to bring about His will. But the disappointing thing is, like I say, the number of the people that have shown where they actually put their faith and where they actually put their beliefs by not voting for Christian parties. You know, that to me is the saddest thing.
Yes. Now, during the elections, it's been observable about the fact that so few Christians voted for parties that are just take pro-life as one one test. Less people in South Africa voted for a pro-life party than the number of men who attended a Mighty Men's Conference of Angus Buchan. So assuming that not one single woman in all of South Africa voted pro-life, which is not possible, there were most of the men who attended a Mighty Men's Conference did not vote for a Christian party or pro-life party. So what good is the Mighty Men's Conferences if even they will vote DA and C, pro-LGBTQ, and all the rest of the perversion, kill babies types? If Christians are voting for parties like that, where's their conscience? Frank?
Maybe we should say not a Christian state as such, but more a secular state.
Well, the state is definitely secular, but the people of South Africa are meant to be majority Christian. Most people in South Africa claim to believe in God, claim to be Christians, and most are affiliated to some church or are baptized. So it's not a secular nation. But we do have a secular government, but then the bulk of these Christians voted for the parties that make up that secular government. That is not right. That's schizophrenia. Yes?
My observation is actually comes down to this, take the conference that they had in America, in the United Methodist Church, and where they've gone. That represents the church today. And I think the church in South Africa is the issue where we've got to deal with ourselves. We each as individuals, and how we're going to take this country back for God. Because we got to actually pray for revival. The Bible says all of sins and fall short of the glory of God. And the trouble is, you cannot expect a sinner. Most of the Christians today, I wouldn't say are Christians. So we've got to take back the church before we can take back politics.
Sadly true. In other words, we've got to evangelize Christians in the church, because not all the Christians in the church even have a right relationship with God. There's a lack of regeneration, there's a lack of a mind being transformed by the Word of God. The Word of God warns us in Romans 12, verse 1, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds. But the average Christian in South Africa does not have a renewed mind. The average Christian in South Africa might feel like a Christian in his heart, but he thinks like a secular humanist in his mind. His kids must go to a secular humanist school and be indoctrinated, brainwashed by a bunch of God-hating pagans and perverts. Babies can be killed. You know, honestly, my children, my grandchildren can have abortions. What kind of Christianity is that? It's insane what we do, which is why we have a Reformation Society, calling people back to the Bible by looking at examples of excellence in history, what led to the revivals and reformations past, character studies, and sometimes addressing contemporary issues to challenge us to think carefully and see that our present society is not that Christian. In fact, as Anthony points out, it seems that some of our Christian parties aren't that Christian, which means we need reformation on a personal level, family level, on a party level, denominational level. I mean, what's just happened with the United Methodist Church in America, they've gone full-blown pagan. They might as well open up a bowl cult, because right now you can have LGBTQ perversion unrepented of. They can be ministers, they can be ministeresses, they can be having so-called wedding services for what the Bible calls an abomination. And there was no debate on the floor when this was brought up. They just voted for the whole LGBTQ agenda. The United Methodist Church can take the word church out. And I think John Wesley would be furious that they're using the word Methodist. Can you imagine what John Wesley would say to the creeps in the United Methodist Church today? A man who rode 250,000 miles preaching the gospel on horseback. What would, averaging 4 or 5 evangelistic meetings a day, what would John Wesley say to the United Methodist Church today, which doesn't evangelize, doesn't preach the gospel? And the Methodist Church has been going downhill for quite some time. My father-in-law, Bill Bathman, after whom this upper room is named, Bathman Memorial Hall, he was a Methodist, and he was called to the ministry. He went to seminary to study to be a minister, and he got converted at the first devotions that they had at university. He said, I'd never heard the gospel before. The first time he heard the gospel, he went forward, and he was converted. But he already started training for being a minister. He went to a Baptist seminary, even though he came from a Methodist church, and he heard the gospel. Now, we've had several Methodists in this mission who all were converted from outside influence, not by the Methodists. They came here unsaved, got converted through the gospel. And I mean, one of the chaps was a sergeant I recruited in the South African Reconnaissance Commander on the bluff in Durban. He came and joined us from Methodist Church. He got converted. We sent him after a while to Baptist Theological College. He did his studies there. So I mean, the amount of Methodists I know who've gotten converted through Baptists, and one of them is Charles Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon was a Methodist, and when he got converted in a primitive Baptist church, I've now confused that one, that's wrong. Charles Spurgeon was converted in a primitive Methodist church. They preached the gospel there. He became a Baptist later. His mother said, I prayed for you to be a Christian, but never that you should be a Baptist. And he responded, well, God has answered your prayers with his usual generosity, and he's given you more than you asked for. But yes, so Charles Spurgeon, while he was converted in a Methodist church, and a primitive Methodist church was more like a Calvinist Methodist church, he chose to be a Baptist. But the amount of Methodists I know who were converted outside the Methodist church makes you wonder what's going on in their churches. Quite sadly. Other comments, yes?
Yeah, so just wanted to refer to the number that you give us. You said that 5% makes things happen, 15%
Yes.
watch things happen,
Yeah.
and 80% have no clue on what is going on.
Now, you know, those aren't my statistics. I'm saying this is what we're taught in like military intelligence, that these are phrases that are thrown around. I've heard them also in some marketing companies. So it's not my statistics, but it does seem to have some truth to it.
Yes, my question now goes to, let's say when you vote someone and that person make any silly decision, you become partaker of whatever decision that leader made because your voice contributes for him to make that decision. Don't you see any danger for somebody to vote someone that they cannot control the decision that they make?
Yes, we've got to vote for, to use the verse in Exodus 18. In Exodus 18, we're told, but select capable men who fear God and who hate dishonest gain, who hate corruption. Appoint them as officials. So that's the principle. Do you know this person as a capable person? Is this a person of integrity? Do they hate corruption? If they're not capable, if they're not people of integrity, don't vote for them. How do you know if a person's a person of integrity? Well, only from their track record. It's hard to know from a newcomer, and that's why I think some people wouldn't vote for some of the new parties because they had no track record. You can promise everything before you're in office, but what are you going to do once you're in office? So we want to check out people who've got a track record. Some people were so desperate they were willing to try untested new parties. But it seems that it's the bad new parties that did the best. MK and PA, who don't seem to have too much principles. But some of these others, like Hope for SA, they had a very nice platform. It looked like the principle was great, but we knew nothing about them, no track record. So that's why it's so important for people to be committed, accountable members of a local church. Because if you're not under authority, you have no authority. So a candidate who wants you to vote for him, but he's not committed to the discipleship and leadership and not able to take rebuke from his leadership in his church, which is faithful to the gospel, how do I know that he's going to stay the course and be faithful in Parliament or City Council? I would say if the candidate is not a member of a Bible-believing church, a member in good standing, he shouldn't even be a candidate. Not one that I would want to vote for anyway. And yet, sadly, there's a lot of Christians today who, I don't go to church. No, I don't think I need to go to church. I worship God at home or on the beach or something like that. I mean, that is foreign to Christianity. In all the history of Christianity, Sunday congregational worship, midweek Bible study, and prayer meeting were just considered standard. This is what Christians did. And to now have people, when I was converted, 1977, it said that the average Christian went to church twice a week. I saw a recent statistic from Joy magazine that the average Christian today attends church twice a month. So we've gone from twice a week to twice a month as the average. Obviously, there are exceptions. There's some who do less, there's some who do more. But I think people who go to church twice a month are not that serious at all. How often do you have a meal? How often do you brush your teeth? How often do you wash? And to think there's Christians who don't think their spiritual life is that important, not even twice a week, some not even once a week. It's really, I think, just church attendance just shows we used to be such a church attending country. When I came from Rhodesia, from a very secular family, I was impressed. Everyone in Cape Town seemed to go to church, and all the shops were shut on Sundays, and the cinemas were shut on Sundays, and the people going to church, the ladies were wearing bonnets and gloves and stockings, and even the young boys were wearing ties and jackets, polished shoes. South Africans were serious. I mean, on Saturday night, everyone's getting their hair washed and polishing their shoes, ready for Sunday the next day. The discipline, it impressed me immediately. Because in Rhodesia, I saw nothing like that. My family never went to church. My whole time of growing up, we never went to church, not for Sunday school, not even Christmas, not even Easter. Come to South Africa, it looks like everyone's serious about church. I went to the South African Army, and the first thing I heard from the Sergeant Major was Anglicans, Assemblies of God, Baptists, Brethren. Divide everyone up into different denominational groupings. There's the clerk writing on people's name and number and so on for the roll call, because attending church was not optional. It was discipline in the South African Army. We were given our Bibles before we were even given our rifles, and that was part of our inspection. And at the end of who knows how many, maybe 70 different denominations that were called out, there were still 4 men in the middle of the square. And the Sergeant Major asked, well, what are you? We thought, what could they be? I mean, we've heard everything. And this one chap said, atheist, sir. And the Sergeant Major scowled and he said, atheist? Atheist? SWAPO atheists, the ANC are atheists. This is a Christian army. Send them to the Pentecostals. So those 4, they didn't get a 40-minute Anglican service, they didn't get a 1-hour Baptist service, they got a 3-hour Pentecostal service every Sunday. Yes.
Our base, they send him to the Roman Catholic, send him to the Roman Catholic.
I think my Sergeant Major had a better idea. The Pentecostals are more likely to get them saved. But yes, so I mean, to think that we used to have that kind of country, and our whole company got into trouble when one person was found with pornography on the base. Extra strut PT, 8.4 kilometer fuss bait, running with drums and so on. There was, we had pastors cancelled because somebody took the Lord's name in vain. They closed the bar for weeks because somebody had taken the Lord's name in vain at the bar while drunk. Now, you know, imagine that happening today. Can you imagine anywhere in the world that happening? We used to have that here. I mean, South Africa used to be such a God-fearing country. Pornography was banned, abortion was banned, and blasphemy. The last temptation of Christ might have been shown in Britain and America. It was banned in South Africa. Blasphemous, anti-Christ film, not allowed. So to think we've gone from that stage to where, I don't know what's banned in this country now, except the truth. So, plainly, we don't have a God-fearing country anymore. We need reformation, we need revival. That, ultimately, you can say the only solution is not political, but spiritual. We need a spiritual revival.
I think we're going to go back to the Bible because some people turn from their wicked
Yes,
and humble themselves and pray. And now hear from heaven
yes.
and heal them. And I think we've got to look, we as Christians, we actually got to get down to being on our knees.
2 Chronicles 7:14. If my people who are called by my name will humble themselves and pray and seek my face and turn from their wicked ways, then will I hear from heaven, I will forgive their sin and I will heal their land. That is the formula. That is the requirement. That's what God says. That is the hope for our country. But until the churches get serious, we can't expect much better of the political parties. But we've got some churches that are worse than some of these political parties. We've got some unregenerate ministers in the pulpit. And if you want to know why, just go to the theological seminaries. You'll see why we have the kind of ministers we've got in the pulpits. A lot of these theological seminaries are cemeteries. The spiritual life is hideous. So any other questions? Yes.
People on God fearing the ANC theory.
Yes.
And that's what happened in this election. That people they decided that after 30 years of this tsunami of corruption and incompetence and crime and stuff, they were petrified that the ANC was going to be able to carry on. And I mean, a friend of mine who voted for a smaller party normally, she said to me, No, I voted for the DA because the other party has a smaller footprint in the Western Cape. So that's how people were thinking.
Yeah.
Yes.
They were actually willing to hold their nose and vote for the DA just because of fear. Yeah.
Yes, I know so many people who are dedicated Christians who voted for the DA. It's just staggering. And then I know some, even members of my own family, who didn't vote at all. My elder brother has, for years, said he's never voted, never even registered to vote. I think he might have voted in Rhodesia once, but he's never voted in South Africa. And, you know, that kind of irresponsibility, we've got a lot of people who, I've even met people who are proud, I've never voted. And they think that you deserve a pat in the back. You know, I'm so much better than everyone else because I've never voted. And you've got no right to criticize or complain about the situation if you didn't even try to make it better by empowering someone who's got a better policy than what's ruling right now. I'm amazed that one single soul voted for the ANC. After 7 years of incompetence, corruption, thievery, it's, you know, forget about 40%. Obviously, a lot of the people rejected the ANC and they've lost a high percentage, but why would any one single soul vote for such a corrupt body? 6 times, this is the 7th time. So, well, that's putting it, that's being charitable. But honestly, why would you vote for, look, we can all make a mistake. You make a mistake, you know, we're all human. But you do the same thing twice, now you're stupid. You do the thing 6, 7 times, you've got a hidden agenda. I'd say anyone who can vote for the ANC is either unbelievably evil or incredibly stupid. Why would anyone vote for such a corrupt, incompetent, useless criminal party, especially after they made us all suffer during the lockdown lunacy, destroyed so many people's businesses, stole the 500 billion that's meant to give relief to the people whose businesses are forced to shut, and then give them another chance? Honestly, I mean, that is just unbelievable. There's a book out called Is South Africa Too Dumb for Democracy? And I've never read it, I've just seen the cover, but with the results of the election, obviously the bulk of the people who voted in the last election shouldn't be allowed out without adult supervision. Because to vote for the parties they did, it just makes you wonder, do they actually understand what's going on at all? How can anybody deserve a vote who is so damn stupid to vote for evil, corrupt, communist thieves who've murdered people, who kill babies? We've had 2 million babies killed in this country since Mandela legalized it on the 1st of February 1997. 2 million babies killed. We're not talking about the 4,000 farmers and their families tortured to death while government laughs about it. When Peter Groenewald was speaking about the pouring of boiling water from kettles down children's throats, torturing, hanging kids in a bathroom, crucifying a young girl who was raped on a kitchen table in the farm, and members of parliament laughing and saying, bury them alive. Laughing in parliament. Members of parliament, honourable members of parliament. I mean, how can people like that even be allowed to be out? Yeah, they are oxygen thieves, they're waste of rations, they're disgrace, they're criminals. And just like MTG said to Fauci, you know, doctor, you belong in prison, reprehensible human being. Well, in fact, Fauci is reprehensible. Fauci does belong in jail. He shouldn't be a doctor. He should be prosecuted for crimes against humanity. But so should most of our government. Absolute criminals. Thieves, murderers, communists, baby killers, perverts, scum. Not honourable, any of them. So the people who voted for them are guilty of a terrible crime as well. But I do believe there's hope, because whatever's up there right now is going to fail. It's going to fail and fall. It's as sure as gravity, as sure as the sun will rise tomorrow. They're going to fail, and this country is going to be worse as a result of the votes of this election. And hopefully, somewhere along the line, some of these people responsible for this, whether by complicity or by voting, are going to have to say, something's wrong, you know, we've got to do something. Maybe some of them will be teachable, but there's no hope if people aren't humble and teachable. If we can have maybe our society needs to suffer more before we get to that point. The people in the Western Cape are so stupid as to vote for parties that don't believe in their best interest, don't deserve the kind of peace and safety they're asking for. As it said, if you're willing to trade your security for for safety, you don't deserve security or safety. And I think that's where we are. We've got people in this province who know that we could do a better job on our own, but they decided to vote for a national party, a DA with national aspirations, because they fear the ANC more than they want a better future for their children and grandchildren. And then there's a whole lot of people who supported the DA, who voted for the DA, who said as a result of this election, they're going to encourage their children and grandchildren to leave the country. I've heard some of them who voted for DA, admitting they voted for DA, saying, I will not invest another penny in this country because nothing is safe, nothing is secure, the economy is going to go down, and they might confiscate all the property anyway. So there's people, businessmen, I heard some of them on Biz News, are literally saying, you know, I did vote for the DA, but I'm going to encourage my children to leave the country now. Now, those people are somehow normal, but a person like me who has encouraged all my children and grandchildren to see a future in this country and is staying here, you know, we're the extremists because we believe in a Cape Independence, but I'm looking for a future that's going to give a better future for my children and grandchildren than there is right now. And the only hope for that is a free and independent Cape of Good Hope. We've got to break free from this corrupt criminal chaos that's dragging the whole country down. And if anyone's got a better suggestion, they should speak up. Because I've heard people criticize our independence movement, but who's offering us a better solution? What better solution is there? So we're still promoting Cape of Good Hope independence, and I hope we can get the Cape Independence parties here soon to give us their take on what happened and why it happened and what we can learn from it and how we can do better in the future. And we'll let you know as soon as we know that they're here and available. Any other questions or comments? I did address that a bit before we came in, and I think the situation is going to get worse, which is only going to accelerate people's interest in Cape Independence, just like after the riots in KZN when they had the looting sprees. Interest in Cape Independence exponentially went up. The worst things get, whether it's the COVID cult and the lockdown lunacy, which made people interested in Cape Independence. Before the lockdown lunacy masquerade madness, we had 7,000 sign up for Cape Exit. Today we've got 840,000 sign up for Cape Independence. A large amount of that was because of the lockdown and because of the riots in KZN. People said we don't want that here. So the worse things get, the more people will be interested in Cape Independence. It's just like most people didn't want to leave the Titanic when it first struck the iceberg because they couldn't believe this big ship could sink. But the further the Titanic descended into the North Atlantic, the more people were scrambling to get into lifeboats. The first lifeboats were not filled. People left the ship before it had really started to sink much. Many were saying, you know, this is crazy. It's so cold out there, and, you know, they feel safe on the ship. I mean, it's such a big ship. How can this ship possibly sink? Titanic's unsinkable. But the further the ship sank, and the more it became clear the ship is sinking, then the people were scrambling and fighting to get onto lifeboats, and there weren't enough space in lifeboats by then. And you know the difference between South Africa under the ANC and the Titanic. When the Titanic went down, all the lights were on. Well, remember, Cape Independence Party is a political party. They weren't even allowed to be on the last election. But Cape Exit has 840,000 signed up supporters. I don't know what they voted. I'd like to find out what happened to them, because many of them had to vote a DA. I don't know how else we can explain the numbers. Does anyone know how many votes the referendum party got?
Very little.
Did they get a seat? I don't think they were on the board. So I'd like to hear the numbers from the people who've been investing in this, like Cape Independence Action Group. They must have some stats. But plainly, a whole lot of those people who'd signed up for Cape Exit voted for the DA. I mean, statistically, that's a given. It must have happened. So something radically wrong has happened there. And that's why we've got to address this. And it's important to address these things quickly, because the sooner we learn the lessons and start planning for the future, the better. We can't just say this is terrible and, you know, tell our children to leave the country. That's no solution at all. That's not the way Christians respond. We need to be committed, invested, making disciples, working for Reformation revival. But I must say one thing that is a distinct possibility. You might have heard it here first. I think that you're going to see MK and IFP join together and work for independence for KwaZulu-Natal. I think the Kingdom of KwaZulu is going to secede. And then the Cape's really going to have to scramble to get up to speed, because we've always thought Cape would be independent first and KZN would follow. But it looks like they might lead the pack right now.